really excited to invite an ag transition specialist, business advisor, Joel Bokenfohr here.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Sean. I'm excited to be here too, especially when you said it's gonna be just like the Ellen Show, but with more dancing. So I'm pumped.
Well, listen, I saw you and I said, listen, Joel was made for dancing. I saw your shoes. You're made for dancing. So, really excited that you're here talking about what everyone has on their mind, which is, transition planning, succession planning. And by the way, do you watch Succession? Have you seen the show Succession?
I have seen Succession, yeah, a little bit. I haven't made it through all the way yet.
Okay, to me, it's the best show. And every time I'm going to watch it, I'm going to think of you now. But like I said, I need you guys to engage, ask your questions for Joel. We also have some poll questions as well. And why don't we put up the first poll question? And Caitlin, I'm going to ask you, what is that first poll question that we want to ask to the audience?
Sure. So the poll question is, what is the biggest challenge in your succession plan right now?
Love that, love that. So I'm excited to see everyone's answers come through. Now, I want to ask you, what is the number one question that you get from families, from individuals that you're helping to advise?
Yeah, and so that's a great question, right, to start with. And I'd say, right, it depends is almost all my answers. But senior generation, a lot of times it's, I don't want to pay any tax, right? It's kind of a big thing. But a lot of it is how do we get going? How do we start the plan? Right, it's a little bit cliche, but what's this process going to look like for us as we go forward? And how do we start to connect the pieces together so that, right, we get what's best for the family, the business, and eventually ownership.
So I'm just curious because, you're dealing with, obviously, this group, young farmers. I know many of them creative, driven, ambitious, innovative, and there is a cohort of individuals that have run this business like well-oiled machines, and they kind of have like an old school traditional mindset. So how do we convince them to change? And what have you seen that's really worked?
Yeah, I mean, that's, you've kind of hit the nail on the head there with one of the big frustrations, I think, in families that, right, sometimes the old saying used to be, if I farmed the way my father farmed, I wouldn't be farming anymore. If he farmed the way, he farmed the way his father farmed, he wouldn't be farming, right? So the people that I see out there, men, women that are kind of taking leadership in this industry are really starting to push that process a little bit of, I'd like to do something a little bit different, take a bit of a spin on it, but recognize we do have, fairly established businesses that have processes that, are predominantly on a commodity base, but right within that, there's to your specialty, a lot of disruption opportunities too for people to take forward and look at maybe new ways of doing things. So number one is starting to put that together and recognize that there's somewhere for the senior generation, the junior generation to meet in the middle.
No, I love that. Now, Caitlin, we put up this poll question. Do we have some results from the group?
Everything seems to be really neck and neck right now.
Okay.
So there's no clear winner, but getting the conversation started and committing decisions forward seem to be the big two.
Now, are you surprised by those results?
Not at all, right? Especially at a young farmer saying, right, how do we get kind of rolling, right? I was actually surprised. I thought maybe the combine question that came in earlier was my girlfriend in there about affordability, right? All he wants is a new combine, right? But it really does come back to how do we get processes going? How do we get started? And so there's a lot of great ways that we can start to break that out. And I think one of the first ways is farms are often ambitious on collecting a lot of information. So they're going out there, they're searching for that perfect answer that might be out there, and sometimes it starts with a bit of brainstorming. So we're starting to brainstorm and vision a little bit, exactly to Jessica's point before this. What are the options? What could it look like? What's that family vision going to look like for us matching senior generation goals, junior generation goals, and and maybe some of the kids that aren't coming back to the farm, matching their goals into things too, that if we can line these three things up, we've got kind of that vision that's a real positive anchor for us as we start to progress on our transition process.
Well, easier said than done to match up everyone's goals together. But Caitlin, do we have some questions?
You know what? We don't have questions right now, but I'm going to ask my own question.
Okay,
if that's
great.
Okay. So, Joel, what is your advice for the in-law factor when it comes to transition planning?
Okay, you just brought up
Right?
the juiciest question, the in-law factor.
Somebody had to ask, and I will be the one that does it.
Yeah. And I'm surprised. I mean, I'll probably end up tossing this back to you to weigh in on too, right? But it's one of those ones that as we start out, right, that we want to make sure they're part of these conversations at some point, right? Us as a family get to decide, right, what the process is going to be for welcoming people into our families, how we're going to make that a comfortable process that, right, are they going to be part of it? Are they going to be part of making decisions? And what's that going to look like? How are we going to, help welcome them in, help them understand the business that we're going into and what it could look like over time, right? And then you do get into all kinds of conversations that, right, we have substantial businesses that, what's it going to look like operationally? Their role in the business, are they compensated? Are there agreements we're going to want to put in place if, like, if your daughter's taking over the ranch and she brings back someone like Machine Gun Kelly or something that, to take over that, right, you might want to start looking at things a little bit too there. So it's lots of technical things. I know you live it firsthand as well, right? But these are chats I'm in every day. I'd love your perspective on it too.
Yeah, well, I have been so lucky to be able to speak with other transition planning specialists here at FCC, including Anessa Good. And one of the things that she has brought forward to me is just being okay with having that open communication, going to the table and realizing you all want the same thing at the end of the day, and that is for you to have a happy, healthy farm life.
Yeah. No, I love that. And I would like to remind everybody, feel free to, put your questions in. We'd love to get some questions from you. By the way, Machine Gun Kelly, that's the thing that I'm worried about with my daughter. No, I think Machine Gun Kelly's a great guy. Pete Davidson, though, that's who I'm worried about. No, there's a lot of volatility in the world right now, Joel, and how does this actually impact business transition, succession plans going forward, with fertilizers going, crazy and inflation and food prices, the world is constantly changing. How does this play into our transition plans?
Yeah. And I mean, you've hit it. And I don't mean to pick on Machine Gun Kelly, like, love him. He's just, right, trying to peel it just on the wrong side of 30, so trying to act like I'm still cool. But you're exactly right in terms of inflation, right? It's something that becomes a big challenge, right? We've seen, I think JP Gervais, our chief economist, did a presentation that, land values are up 8% over the last year. And so these are the what ifs that every farm's starting to face, right? They're looking at what ifs. And honestly, this is where our transition plans sometimes go off the rails a little bit, that we get caught up in the what ifs. What is it going to look like? What if Japan prints a whole bunch of money, like I just saw the Bloomberg text yesterday, right? Or, what's it going to look like if, hopefully there's if there's a weather event that's significant in the world, what opportunities that can create. But what it really means to us in the transition world is starting to put those what ifs off the table a little bit, right? We want to focus on what's under our control now. So we want to focus on the fundamentals that we have in place, right? Our good business plans, what do our net worths look like? Where are we going for our strategic vision as a family? And what do we want those conversations as a family to look like? So we can focus on kind of, I always say, tend to the garden you can touch a little bit, right? That we can focus on where we're going, and then we can start to factor in some of the scenarios that might pop up, right? So if there's more risk in the world, more volatility, good or bad, right? We're positioned to kind of take advantage of that either way or protect ourselves if we need to.
Right. So. But the world is just going to continue to be uncertain. It's not going to change. The volatility, I mean, in my mind, I think it's just going to, it's never going to stop. There's going to be new innovations. There's going to be new global, macro impacts, that are going to be happening. So I think we constantly have to be nimble and flexible and experimental, especially when it comes to our plans.
Yeah, you're 100% right? I mean, and this is where, like a lot of families would look at things too as well in agriculture, that what are those behaviors we're cultivating within our own family to kind of take advantage of that, right? That we might be exploring opportunities, right, to help non-farm children explore some of those opportunities in the business, or to position our farm to take advantage of some of those swings we might see in commodity markets, or look at disruptive things that might come along our way that we could diversify or jump into and really kind of capture a market in. And so the families I see are starting to really kind of take progress is where we're approaching transition, like what are we going to take advantage that might be disruptive in the future too, so that we've got a real business plan anchored in that, and we can afford at the right time to position ourselves to jump into a venture to take advantage of something like that. So always encourage that those good things are in place though, right? That we've got our fundamentals and we really understand kind of our core business, and then can leverage what might be out there too. Yeah, no, absolutely. And I see Caitlin, we got a couple questions coming in. So Caitlin, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm so glad there's so many great questions in here now, so we don't actually have to dance today. So that's really
Good.
great.
All right.
So one of the questions asked was, my brother and I are going to be taking over the family farm together. What's your advice on being able to do that equally?
This is succession. In succession, there's there's three brothers and there's one daughter. How do we do this?
Yeah. And so, right, the answer is, it depends, right? But right, with siblings, it's something that, or any business partner, right? It's like it's a second marriage almost, right? You're going into something that we want to be openly communicating about how we're going to do this, right? So we both are setting each other up for our own expectations and success along the way, right? So some of the pieces I think in succession where they may be missed is those front end conversations with siblings about what's it going to look like over time. So it's always looking, do we want to be in business together, right? What are the things we're doing right now that make being in business together great? What can we do as we go forward in the future that we can make our business relationship even better, right? And the siblings I see that actually take that and be proactive with that approach are the ones that really kind of anchor it. They've got, clarity on roles, who's doing which things, which operations, right? They've got kind of a shared sense of purpose and risk of where they're going and wanting to move their business to. And they're fundamentally having those kind of family meetings and discussions about exploring opportunities and how they can kind of put things together and deciding, right, do we want to own things together as we go forward? Or do we want to kind of work together and be separate, but still kind of run our businesses together? And so those sibling relationships become so important, or any business partner, that there are young farmers that kind of match each other and do some joint venture things that they've really foundationalized how they're going to approach their business with intention before they kind of jump in and say, we'll just figure it out when we get there, right?
No, that's great advice. We talked about in-laws, we talked about siblings, we could talk about significant others and continue on. I know, Kaylin, you have some experience with that too. But I know the chat is just going crazy. So let's get another question from the audience.
Yeah, this is another sibling question, but a different scenario with siblings. Any insight on how to structure a transition with one child taking over the farm, whether buying it out or in the future, and two off-farm siblings?
Right. And so this is one that, right, every farm is going to have a different answer to how they interpret this question, right? I think it's something, when we're looking at it or we're brainstorming some of those options or ideas that farms are looking at, right? Always kind of recognizing what is our core business. So what's the foundation of our business in terms of, right, our operating debt, our inventory, our equipment, and what's that going to look like? And then maybe drawing a bit of a line in terms of, right, for non-farm children that, right, what's maybe on the senior generation's net worth side, like land or like investments or those things, and starting to anchor it into, okay, how do we set up a structure that's going to work for all family members, that the business, if that's our goal as the senior generation to transition the business down, that the next generation coming in is set up for success, that they're not kind of put into a position where they're over leveraged by kind of the rebuy or something like that they can kind of make it sustainable for them. But then we've also asked the next generation, the non-farm kids that potentially involved, that we've asked them their opinions about how they see things going, that they've been included in those conversations, that are there ventures that the family could help support them to be set up for success. And right, the old adage, fair is not always equal, is sort of a tagline, but something that it depends. And if we can have these conversations up front, starting to pull it and starting to create transparency with the conversations, we can get there.
So what do people get hung up on the most? From a technical aspect, is it around valuation? What do people really get hung up in your experience?
Yeah, I think, to the point earlier, right? I think the dream to continue the farm, that legacy piece, to keep moving forward, right? And we sometimes have to recognize that the bulk of our assets, right, is that, right, it's not necessarily solely tied to productive capability in terms of land or things like that. So sometimes, right, dollars is something some people get hung up on for sure, but one of the big things is people missing out on that equal opportunity to be part of conversations, and that opportunity to be asked what's important to them as maybe not transitioning into the farm, that what would they like to see? Are there gifts early in life that might help them in their lives? Are there ventures that the business or the farm could support them moving forward? And the real pain I see is when people don't get asked, I guess, to be part of those conversations, and they never really come with a why of why things were done the way they were. So sometimes as a family, we're making decisions together, and you can find a way that through those conversations and kind of exploring things that the whole family kind of can support what they help build.
It's interesting because you mentioned like some philosophical questions as opposed to, I thought people get wrapped up in the technical, so that's really fascinating. Caitlin, I want to come back to you. Another question from the audience.
This just leads perfectly into the next question. It's like we planned this, but really we didn't. Transition on our family farm is looking like my parents' decision-making, meeting with the accountants and lawyers and being fairly secretive about it. Do you have any suggestions on how to get involved in the discussion when it seems like they don't want to include their children in the planning?
Well, I can answer it. Private investigators, nanny cams. No, I'm joking. Yeah, that's a great question.
Yeah, what would they do in succession, I guess? It's what is fantastic, right? And this happens, right? So sometimes parents are so afraid, like I see it on the other side, right? These are incredibly stressful decisions for the senior generation, right? They're trying to balance, they get so terrified of doing the wrong thing that they, tend to do nothing, or they keep hopping around and hoping they're gonna collect all the information that's out there that, if we get the right accounting plan, we get the right legal plan in place, that it's all just going to work. But oftentimes, without people to get their suggestions in up front, you kind of get to a real danger zone where, people haven't had opportunity to buy into that process. And so always a process building one, but when you're in that next gen position, sometimes simply, going into these conversations and kind of expressing that, hey, what would I have to do to kind of show you that I'd like to be involved in these decisions, I see a lot of young farmers look at, if I build a bit of a proposal that I could present to them, that these are my personal goals. This is maybe my proposal, how I would get there, my role in labor and management and eventually in ownership, that we can start the conversation from our side of things and sort of present that and try to say, hey, I know this is a hard conversation. These are difficult things for you to solve. But without some clarity or certainty about where I end up at the end of the day, it's going to be a real challenge for me to know where I fit and where I belong long term.
And I'm just curious, in terms of your role, when do I bring you in? When do I bring in Joel in this? Is it when is it right at the beginning when I need to develop this plan and this proposal that I want to present back to the group?
Yeah, and you got the right one there. Is that a third party can sometimes really be of huge advantage in this, helping bridge that relationship and communication. So for us, we have a really unique role that through FCC here that we like to be part of those early conversations to help people scope out what it could look like. What are some of the things that might come up along the way, and flesh out what their goals are to kind of line up with. And along that, there's great industry advisors. And I know I have some fantastic colleagues here that will be in the group chat after that you can kind of answer questions to. But getting advice early up front and recognizing that as much advice and input as we can get from professionals that see things really can make a huge difference in our farm and how we plan, so that those little nuggets. And then when we want to, your accountants, your lawyers, all the technical experts as well, that they're there to guide you through your plan as you develop it, and really bring that expert advice to make sure you can kind of cover all the things you aren't always experts in.
And so what is the first thing that somebody should do when they're embarking on this process? They're now thinking about succession planning. What's the first step that they should do?
Yeah, I think great point, And I think we're trying to collect information, We're trying to collect scenarios, ways to do things, so that we can get to kind of defining what it is that we really want. And when we can start putting financials to things in terms of, what does viability look like? What's our business plan look like going forward? So that we've got kind of that information we can use to make decisions going forward. And then really starting a process where you're going to get to meeting and regularly discussing these things as a whole family, that to put it on the table.
Love that. Caitlin, do we have one more question?
Yeah, we do. So can you please outline what important topics to cover as a farming family around succession? So for more context, senior members who are retiring and their retirement is connected to the farm as the next generation continues.
Yeah, I think the trends that we've talked about are really popping up. That in farms, we've spent it's been they're generational businesses. They're things that have been passed on, that each generation has kind of worked their wealth back into what it is. And so in many cases, we don't have other retirement options like Jessica mentioned in place that can allow them to retire out of the business. And so we do need to come up with these things. When I talk about it, number one for me is always kind of, where does the senior generation end up in things, And I think in most families, we're still working at businesses, but we want to start talking about, when do we kind of look at transferring management control? What's maybe our plan for long-term living costs, and what's that going to look like for the senior generation? So they get what they kind of need and expect and want out of the business, and they can frame that for the next gen. So the next gen is coming in and they know what they're working towards. That if we can do some really good budgeting, some really good goal planning with the senior gen, we can start to talk about now how do we create the opportunity for the next gen to come into this business that, right, they've got a structure that's going to work for them. And then we can start to talk about the hows and the whys and what can happen if they're clear on their goals and looking at all those things in terms of labor management and ownership so that the people receiving that at the end of the day are set up to be in a position to receive those.
That's fantastic. One more question. Hopefully we can do this quickly.
It is a
rapid fire.
It is a quick
Joel.
question,
Okay.
I promise. How often should owners be sitting down to discuss all aspects of their transition plan on their farm for their business?
Yeah, and I would keep it brief, but the answer is right. It's something that we want to be doing these things so that we're making decisions and writing them down and we're not kind of always stuck in the same conversation, right? So some families I see, right, a monthly plan of how we're going to do this, right, and setting a deadline that we're going to meet every Saturday morning at 9 o'clock or whatever, or at, right, 4 o'clock or whenever, right, that we've got a monthly plan or a weekly plan, depending on kind of the urgency and what we have to solve. So we can keep our checklist moving forward of the activities we've got to solve, but that we're building that regular habit of process of getting together, discussing these things that, right, in the farm context, you're never short of things to do. So it always becomes something that we delay or we push off or we say, when I have that little bit more information, I'll make a decision. But I know that's not brief, but finding that timeline you can commit to as a family and moving forward and writing things down so you don't get stuck in the same conversation is huge.
Well, I think that's a great way to end it. And I want to thank you so much for all that great advice and some of the insights. And I know folks are going to be connected and getting connected to you. Your email inbox is going to be inundated. I'm sorry. But no, it was really great to have you here in studio, in the theater to answer some of these questions. So thank you so much.